Let's get started on the MIT report. It's actually out of MIT's media group called NANDA, I think is it. It's a Project NANDA. Anyway, they came out with this. It's pretty long. It's 26-page report on kind of their findings with the enterprise and how are people doing with generative AI and the headlines and all this other stuff. And the one big headline everybody's talking about is the fact that 95% of AI pilots fail. As you can imagine, that's making its runs and all this other stuff all over the place. The thing is, when you dig into it, and even the report doesn't necessarily frame this up as AI is failing, but of course, that's what is going to be broadcast. So if you hear that, I would encourage you to not react to that. But also, even though I do think there's some merit to the fact that, yeah, a lot of specialized AI projects are failing, I see headlines where that's interpreted as, see, AI doesn't work. It's not, going anywhere, all these other things. That's really not what the data is saying, and even what their findings are saying. So once again, headlines matching the research, even the research being taken out of context, and then even some of the findings of the research can be challenged because they lack some of the content text. Now, to be clear on one of the things, there's also two big differences in what they found. So when they looked at the adoption, they broke it into two different categories. One was general purpose LLMs. So this would be something like if you have a Copilot or a Gemini or something like that, versus an embedded task specific generative AI. So if you got really surgical with the generative AI, what did you see? So, if a company kind of said, hey, we're going to move forward with, we're going to experiment with, I don't know, Google Gemini. Well, that was significantly higher in terms of success. Now, again, it didn't get into the details of what their success measures were, other than to say, the executive sponsors that, obviously weighed in on this said that they had some sort of notable improvements on what they were doing. And they only did include, larger organizations. So of course there's all the like, well, what about this and this and this? But if you look at the general purpose LLMs, the broader ones, that one had like a successful implementation rate of about 40%. It was this specialized task-specific Gen AI that had the 5%. Now, even looking at their answers and kind of some of the conclusions on this, I think they had some really good points that actually contradict some of the headlines you have, which is, everybody's talking about AI is going to replace everybody's jobs in the next 3 to 5 years. And this pushed back and said, not at this pace. If we can't even have successful pilots in specialized AI greater than 5%, the mass layoffs aren't necessarily going to be a big threat. But where I would push back on their findings on that is the fact that it's not what AI can do, it's what executive leaders believe it can do. And this actually supports what I've been saying for quite a while, that I firmly believe companies are over-indexing on these layoffs, and then they're going to have to make up their losses, or the poor people left behind are just left scrambling, which is in some cases even more dangerous because it can create the perception everything's fine as these people are burning the midnight oil, trying to make up for things and make up for the failures of these specialized AI tools. And then either they quit, or the fact they're moving so fast, they can't actually keep pulse on what's happening as these AI tools are trying to help them. And they're just introducing risk after risk after risk. So even these general tools are going to cause major problems. Add on top of that, because of the fact it wasn't done with specialized surgical care, when it blows up, there is no documented history of what went on. There's no, and you could go, well, isn't it in the LLM? Yeah, if you want somebody to sit and try and comb through it with a fine-tooth comb to find it, but there's going to be no consistency because it's people just with general tools trying to make things work. This actually reveals a huge risk to organizations, especially when you take it in conjunction with some of the data I'm going to talk about later. But all that to say, if you're an employee going, one, I believe that, every job is at major risk here in the next couple years. This does push back against this. This should also push back against some of the leaders who may be leaning into this going, boy, maybe I should get rid of all my people because AI is super effective and can do the work of any individual. The data says otherwise. The data says otherwise. Now, where I want to challenge some of this is I would have loved to dig deeper into things because I am almost 100% confident in the 95% of cases of failed AI pilots. I can almost predict how they went. I truly can. And that's not me saying, oh, I guarantee this. No, but these surgical ones, we aren't doing a good job with it on the general level. The number of specialized projects I lean into where even basic questions of like, what does good look like on the other side? How confident are we in the data of how this thing works today? How are we going to measure if it's actually driving success or not? Like some of these foundational questions, many of them are unanswered as things are moving forward, which is a recipe for disaster. Now, what I can tell you is when you do it right, that 5%, it's not going to jump to 100%. But it is possible. What I would challenge in here is it is absolutely possible to see a much higher success rate than 5%. And I know that because my success rate on task-embedded, task-specific Gen AI is much higher than 5% success. So you can go, well, maybe you just got the luck of the draw, or maybe just these other things. I guess that's some pretty good luck that I'm having then if I'm taking that path. And so all that to say, don't let this data shy you away from, okay, the models aren't ready to handle the task specific or embedded stuff. It's actually really capable of it when it's approached correctly, which is, I talk a lot about the fact that it's about the right people in the right roles, using AI on the right things, overseen by people who know what they're doing. Many people are trying to skip those steps, not let alone what I said just a minute ago about, mapping out what are you trying to solve, like all these other things. So because those things are often being skipped, am I surprised by a 95% success rate or failure rate? I'm not at all. In fact, I would love to see, can I actually see those 5%? NAMDA team, if you have a chance, reach out to me. I'd love to see the 5% and actually see how many of those are actually successful. And I would bet if they are successful, one, they've checked these boxes that I've described. Two, I would bet even within those 5%, if you were actually to dig a little bit deeper, they may not be quite as successful as they show up on paper. All that to say, I hope that brings some calm to people, around like, oh my word, AI is on the verge of taking over everything. And it's not because the models can't perform. That's the thing. It's not because the models can perform. They didn't mention that in here, but you'll see later in the data, with the failure rate is largely due to a lot of the things I just described. And it's still very fragmented, even within organizations. Even when they try and do a specialized AI build, they're battling against other AIs. That's the thing. AI is actually successful in some of these task-specific things. Through my experience, it's just that like a lot of people are like, they've got their own ways of doing it with their own little AI tools, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But I hope that gives some calm to the fact that, AI is not peaked to take over everything, overnight here anytime soon. But business leaders need to be aware of this because they're spending billions of dollars on these AI pilots and they are failing catastrophically. So when I make posts, when I talk about this stuff and say, slow down and do this correctly, if you don't, you might as well dig a hole, take all the money you're planning for that specialized AI pilot, pour it in the hole, pour gasoline on it and light it on fire, because you've got a better shot of making money through that approach than you do, or being successful than you do actually just running forward with these pilots. Now, you may say, well, Christopher, but these general ones seem to be doing pretty well. Correct. And while they don't go into the detail here, I would say if you were to dig into the general purpose LLM success, if they were to say, but how do you quantify that and how do you scale the success you're having with that? It would be almost impossible to answer that question because that's all being done on a general level. It's being done generally. We're seeing like, hey, we're assessing, are people finding value and seeing success with these, general models, and people are going to say yes, and things probably to some degree are improving, but it's not repeatable. It's not something you can continue to repeat. So even with this MIT data, there's a lot of nuance. Now, the frightening statistic that I think should wake up everybody and every business leader or everybody who may look at this data and go, see, if you're a business leader, you might go, see, this is why we're not jumping in with AI. If you're an individual, you might go, see, this is why, I don't need to get on the AI train. Well, the next data point is that 90% of employees were using LLMs on the regular. Only yet, contrast that with only 40% of the companies interviewed had an approved AI tool. So this opens up a whole lot more risk here, but also to individuals who may be AI resistant, who may be kind of one of those ones who are hanging on and going, I'm not going to adopt or use these AI tools. You are very much in the minority now, and that is a huge risk. I've been saying since Gen AI came out that it's not going to be people who, it's not AI necessarily that's going to be a threat to people. It's going to be people who figure out how to use AI. And this adoption rate now is up to 90%. I mean, that's high. Now, granted, I can tell you from some of the work I'm doing with the AI effectiveness report right now, just because 90% of people are doing it doesn't mean they're effective with it. So if you're somebody who's maybe a late bloomer on the AI front, it's not that you're cooked, but this data should really point out to you, like I should at least figure out what I'm doing with these things if you're in that category of not. Now, just because you're using the tools, I will tell you right now, based on my interactions, the data that I have on this stuff, based on what I'm just seeing in general and from other reports, a lot of what's happening right now is not effective use, which, okay, so take comfort in that there's still room for you to grow unless you're in really the front end of the curve of really disciplined AI use. There's room for you to grow. So good news again for everybody. Now, this should have business leaders. This stat should have business leaders losing sleep at night. I mean, absolutely losing sleep at night. This means that the use of just completely unoverseen, unregulated, ungoverned, undocumented AI is massive. Because I bet if I were to dig into the 40% of companies who have, the LLM approved, like they have approved AI tools, I bet if I were to dig into those, the people in that 90% using LLMs, many of them are not using the company approved ones. So one, if you're a company and you have not moved forward with like a general tool like Gemini or Copilot and are not working actively to try and like encourage people to be doing stuff to some degree on your company approved tools, I would get on that. But two, this goes to what I've been saying for a long time, that this is a very human change, and ineffectiveness with your people in AI is going to cost your company big time. I mean, big time. So if you're not taking seriously assessing, hey, do my people in general know how to use AI? Do they know how to be effective with it? Do they know the guardrails, what's acceptable, what not? And yes, some of that should be, general training on how to use the tools, making sure you have clear compliance frameworks for what's acceptable, what's not, that you have, IT policies in place and practices in place to limit the risk. That's all good. However, you also should be really, really paying attention to, are we actively like assessing and developing and growing our people with AI? Because if we're not, this is a huge organizational risk. I mean, this is massive. I saw this and went, holy moly. Companies are, I knew adoption was moving quicker than many anticipated, but there is this kind of factor of like a lot of people, brag about their AI use, or sometimes it's taboo. So you're never really sure where it's at. This data was a bit staggering. This was a bit concerning that, less than 2.5 years in, or just maybe over 2.5 years in, we're this far with adoption. So this one further, if you're somebody who's like, I think this AI bubble's going to pop, like it's going to pop, yes, but not like, it's not going away at all. Now, it was interesting digging into like, okay, where are they using it and all this other stuff. And if you look at where it's being used, it's largely right now being used for, outbound email writing, content creation, doing like analysis of data, automating some of this stuff. So really where a lot of the work right now is being done is in very foundational basic stuff. If today. So lots and lots and lots of room for us to continue increasing our utilization. That's why I say, don't look at 90% and go, oh, we've already fully cracked and, succeeded with AI adoption. Well, its previous statistics contradict that. Then when you actually look at the use cases of how it's being used, you quickly go, okay, well, there is still tons of room to do more with this. Then when you get into some of the details of like, why are they failing? I mean, again, it just continues to be human related. The leaders aren't really bought into it. There's a lack of sponsorship. There's a lack of understanding at senior levels. Poor user experience because the person buying the tool didn't take the time to really understand how the work got done. There's a resistance from people who are naturally afraid that AI is coming for their jobs because companies everywhere are laying people off in double digits. So all this stuff that we go, well, if we can just, I mean, honestly, in many ways, I look at the capabilities of the models, which you're going to see, I'm going to talk about when I talk about some of these latest model releases. It's almost like they're irrelevant when you look at what actually is holding things up, making things fail, all this other stuff. It is very much human transformation going on. I mean, most of the models are Ferraris for what most people need as a daily driver. And that's what is really lacking, is as these AI models just continue to explode in capability, people just aren't keeping up with it. So hopefully that helps, kind of like challenge some of this stuff. But again, the complex stuff that's happening, it's not adopting, and it's not because the models can't do it. And so, I mean, as a recap of all of this stuff, just briefly, like if you're a person, take seriously AI and focus on like how to use it well in more than just repurposing your content or dumping a bunch of stuff in and then asking for it to help summarize it, type of a thing. Like that can be a good use, but there's a lot more room to go. And if you are somebody who adopts and adapts to that capability quicker, you're setting yourself up for success. So there's still plenty of runway, still plenty of room, and take comfort in knowing that AI companies are not ready for AI to just wipe out their workforce. But don't think that doesn't mean that they might not still just off their assumptions. To the business leaders, you need to take seriously what you're doing with this. I mean, you have no choice but to move forward with this, and you got to pick up the pace, and you got to pick up the pace around more than just, hey, did we implement the latest model? Like, there's a lot you got to do with this. And so, and you're opening yourself up to tremendous risk when you ignore the really kind of traditional things that ruin projects. Except the problem is the risks are now greatly amplified with AI. And so if you're not taking that seriously, you are knowingly and willingly opening yourself up to tremendous harm. And I think the other thing I would say is, if you think AI is not all over the place running rogue in your organization right now, this report should just rock your world and make you go, okay, we got to do something. And please do not let it be, well, let's just try and ban AI tools. You're not going to be able to. It's far too integrated into everything, and people already know how to work around it, and they will. So with that, that's hopefully breaks down some of this. I may revisit this at some other, point and take a deeper look at some of these. But that hopefully helps recap for you what this MIT report said and what to do with it, whether you're an individual or a business leader.